activate different parts of the brain. Have you guys had any insight to maybe like what some of these different alkaloids or sub-alkaloid profiles are showing up in people's experiences? Anything like that?
I really appreciate that question because the short answer is no. And frankly speaking, that's the conversation that we need to have with people, is that oftentimes people try to use science in an inappropriate way. They have a goal in mind and they think you can just use words like science and then the question gets answered and the pathway is super clear and illuminated. Now, I get excited about this question because there is a pathway forward and we're absolutely trying to find out, does baeocystin help with this or does aruginacin do this? Like, what is the chemical impact? What is the impact of having this different profile on our physical experience? But the reality is you have to make sure that you can't put the cart in front of the horse, you know? And if the cart in this instance is understanding what each of the secondary compounds does to the personal experience, what the horse looks like is collecting the data on that personal experience and then doing the analysis to see what lines up with it. Because what we would be better off to do is to find a mushroom that, like, we know from anecdotal experience, let's just say it's iceberg. Iceberg is the one that makes us feel really good, emotionally connected with our partner or whatever, and that's like the perfect application for it. What then we can do is say, all right, this is that anecdotal experience that we have consistent data. Many people have tried this. They said this does really good for that. We do the chemo analysis, and when we break down and find, oh wait, there's this different level of baeocystin, there's this different level of aruginacin, then we can start to attribute those impacts to that cocktail, to that ratio of different alkaloids. But if we just start saying, oh, well, what does this do? It's the other way around. When in fact, we need to experience what do the mushrooms do, because at the end of the day, same like cannabis, your body is the real determiner of the effects, not some chemical test. Your body has so many chemical interactions going on because we're made up of trillions of different living organisms coming together to make these amazing things we call humans, right? The mushroom has to go through that entire organism. It has to go through all these different working parts. And so it's not until we collect the data of people's actual experiences that we can do that. And frankly speaking, the best way forward for that is to try to isolate genetics that have the smallest range. And so one of the most interesting insights we got out of the cup data is we actually combined all of the cups that are publicly available online, and we had over 1,000 samples, not just our 270 from this year or the hundreds from the past years, but thousands of samples conglomerated. And we actually found that the most tight genetic was the golden teacher, which to me makes sense because that's the one that's been around since you started growing, since everybody started growing. It's been around. That has a range of like 5 to 8 milligrams per gram. We know that if you're growing that, it's showing up within that range. And if we continuously grow these genetics out and try to grow specific cultivars or strains, the same thing will happen to hillbilly, the same thing will happen to iceberg, the same thing will happen to ape, the same thing will happen to ghost, to tokay, to insert here. Then, once we know that there's not too much variance, once we know that there's not a golden teacher that's 1 milligram per gram and one that's 30, that they're all around 5 to 7, then we can have 10 people try them, say, this is my experience. Then we can relate the chemical data back to those experiences. But if we just go straight from, what does this do? We're going to miss it. We're going to go the same way the cannabis went.
I kind of immediately think of how at like UCSD, when I was there, they were doing testing with people with eating disorders and cancer and stuff like that. And I don't know how much testing they were doing on the product that they were giving to their people in the studies, but I would imagine they're probably using, I don't even know where they're sourcing. I don't know how that works, but they very well could be giving all these people just different varieties with varying levels.
100%.
You know, and then their anecdotal experience is like across the board and high and low, and someone who maybe really needed it and really could have benefited from a lower something high or vice versa. So that's concerning because that testing, that clinical-based testing, is kind of what's moving legislation based on the results. So if you have varying results, like how can you even move? So can you talk a little bit about the type of testing? If I'm not mistaken, it's HPLC. Can you kind of explain that process for everybody who may not know?
100%. So my background, like I said, is in chemistry. And I picked chemistry because it's got wide applications across many industries. As a representative through my background, I started off in food and drug testing, moved to cannabis, moved into the psilocybin space, then moved into biopharmaceuticals, and utilized the same type of testing throughout, high-performance liquid chromatography. Now, what that means is we'll take a solution, and by a solution, I mean any mixture of liquid with other compounds. Frankly speaking, this is a solution, you know what I mean? And we'll make solutions out of mushrooms. So we'll put them into a solvent that will extract out, which is effectively a fancy way of saying we're making chemical tea of mushrooms. And then we put it into our HPLC. Now, high-performance liquid chromatography does this thing called separation. And chromatography is the process of separating out the different compounds that exist within your solution. And so across many industries, if you're trying to find out the chemical makeup of any solution, you'll take it, put it into a known concentration, run it through your instrument. And then the art comes in of varying a method by using different gradients, using different solvents, different chemistries of columns, different pressures. There's so many different toggles and dials that I get to turn to make a method perfect. But what ends up happening is you'll get a line that almost looks like those heartbeat monitors or whatever, where you'll get a peak and then another peak. And each one of those peaks is correspondent to the different chemicals inside of whatever it is you made a solution of. And so when we started analyzing mushrooms, the first things we were obviously looking for was psilocybin and psilocin. But what we ended up realizing is when we put the mushrooms through our method, you don't just get psilocybin peak, psilocin peak. You get all these other separate peaks. And so then it becomes our job to find the certified reference materials that we believe would be inside of these mushrooms, things like aruginacin, things like baeocystin, things like norbaeocystin. And then we line it up with the known standards to our method and our peak. And if they show up at the same time and they have the same chromatographic profile by checking different wavelengths, then we can be sure that this is the compound we're looking for. And then by measuring them against these standards, we can give you a quantifiable amount. And so say we run 10 milligrams per gram standard through our instrument. If a sample comes out at half of that, then we know it's 5 milligrams per gram. If it comes out at double that, we know it's 20 milligrams per gram. But we don't just assume based on a single point. We actually make a standard curve where we'll measure what would it look like if we put a mushroom through that was 1 milligram per gram, all the way up to 100 milligrams per gram, just so that we can be sure that anywhere throughout that process, we can accurately quantify where that mushroom is.
Makes sense. So the device itself doesn't identify, but it gives you basically a readout of what compounds are in there, and then you cross-reference with known data of those compounds, so you're able to identify what's in there?
Yeah, AI isn't that good yet. You know what I mean? Like the computers haven't completely taken over. They just give us a report, and then based on my years of experience as a chemist doing data analysis, I'm able to compare the known standards to the report that's given and give you meaningful information because of that. Now, secondary, at the same time as doing this work ourselves, we are teaching other people how to do this work. We don't believe that you should have to go through years of school as a chemist or all the debt that is required to get these degrees to learn how to use this instrumentation. There's absolutely reasons for academic rigor and getting accreditation through universities, but this is a skill set that anybody can really develop, and with enough experience, you can absolutely gain meaningful information. And I don't think universities need to be the gatekeepers between citizen scientists and finding out what's in the things that they're consuming.
Yeah, it's really like consumer citizen scientist backed. I would liken this to when I first started growing about 8 years ago, and I was in the shroomery forums. There were like these gods in there.
Yeah.
They were like, it was like you could tell they had like biochemical or just chemistry backgrounds, or they were in laboratories, so they were using like equipment. What was most like amazing to me was this thing called a laminar flow, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? They were doing all this like agar plate work, and we were like, wow. And now you got things like the fucking ketchup cup tech and stuff like that, and people are doing this in their homes and getting the same results. So yeah, that's amazing as you're teaching, yeah, you shouldn't have to. Of course, there's things like, if you want to get like, if you want to be a doctor, if you want to like work on in surgery situations or broken arms, you probably should go to school for that.
Well, you have to. There's pathways for that. Like, you're not getting into medical school unless you have an undergraduate degree. But like there's also some people who didn't go to a 4-year degree to become a mechanic. You know what I mean? And you don't really need to do that depending on the application. I bet there's some carpenters out there who just had a really good mentor and like were really good apprentices and went through the process. That's kind of like schooling too, but it's really just about your dedication, your experience, and how much good work you've actually been doing. Because yeah, man, on Shroomery way back, dude, there was like you're saying, there was like gods where if somebody said something, that was just, oh, well, this person said the thing, it has to be right. Oh, Mr. Roger Rabbit said that. Oh, Bodie Mountain Mycology. Oh, Boss said it. Then it's good. It's verified and we trust it, which I think is awesome that we have mentors in the community willing to take a stand and say, no, this is my preferred method. That's where terms like tech, time and experience equals knowledge kind of thing comes out rather than just technique. But, as the industry is starting to balloon or mushroom rather, we can see that, you don't actually need to take all these things to the nth degree for them to work, because I've seen people grow mushrooms outside. I've seen people grow mushrooms in very contaminated environments. And it's like, wait, if you just read Shroomery, if there's any contamination within 50 yards, your shit's going to blow up. Like that was the narrative when I first started. But then second to that is like, I came from a chemistry background and a laboratory background. So when I heard things like laminar flow hood, I was like, wait, isn't that just a component in a biosafety cabinet? And then I'm like, why is it being called a hood? It's a box. Where's the hood part?
Yeah.
It's literally just a box pushing out air in a single direction.
Yep. Well, that's pretty cool, man. I'm interested in learning a little bit about you and how your own scientific exploration has kind of grown. So you went on, being in school and then cannabis industry, and then you're now like, I guess, full-time mycology, full-time, testing in mushrooms. Or do you do any like cannabis related or any other scientific related anything?
So yes and no. Like, I feel so blessed because of the path that I chose. Frankly speaking, a lot of people work very hard to focus on one thing. And I looked at some of my ancestors and some of the people within my family and realized that by getting this education, getting this chemistry degree, I got a really solid plan B, In fact, it's better than a lot of people's plan A. And so actually last year, up until March of this year, I was working at a biopharmaceutical company called Bristol Myers Squibb, working on cancer research, doing ADC drug discovery, which is basically using antibodies to target chemo to tumors rather than killing your whole body. The current state of chemotherapy is you take chemotherapy, it kills the cancer, but it also kills your whole body. By using antibodies and antigens, we can target the tumor cells specifically to just target the tumor and not kill you. And so that's what I was working in. That pays really well, and it's afforded me the ability to just focus on mycology. Frankly speaking though, like having spent almost a year working on developing my own business, building out the lab, I am kind of excited to get back into a more professional or a more like standardized GMP kind of laboratory environment, because not only does that fund the science and what it is that we're doing, but there is benefit to both sides of this. And I'm realizing that with projects like the MycoZine, it can be a yes and. I can do this full-time work, I can help delegate what's going on in the lab, and I can sustain myself in a meaningful way by utilizing the education that I've earned. But currently speaking, yeah, my main projects are the MycoZine and Hi-Fi Labs, Hi-Fi Cup, and what it is that we're doing there. And I participate in a lot of community-engaged scientific activities like the Center for Mycoanalytics and whatever it is we're doing here at Circuit Launch, from DNA barcoding to just developing methods,
Good to know. So let's make a shift back into the MycoZine. Can you kind of talk about the origins of that and how it started, how it's going, and where you want it to go?
Hell yeah, man. So it started on a plane in Cleveland. Actually, it really started when I started this whole thing. And there was a homie back in Milwaukee where I'm from that he used to graph and do art, and I was at his house once, and I saw these little zines, and I was like, what is this? He's like, oh, zines are great. They're just like little information that you can pass around, and like friends will make them and whatever. So that was ruminating in my head for years, but on a plane on my way home from Cleveland, I guess it was last year, 2022, it was like 2 weeks away from the second Oakland Psychedelic Conference. And at our first Oakland Psychedelic Conference, one of the tasks that I had with putting the whole thing together was making sure our booklet, our pamphlet that we handed out to people when they came in, was straight and organized and ready to go. I had to go to Office Depot, I had to format it, I had to figure out how to get these things printed, and I was like, man, holding on to that thing was a really cool memento. It told us about the conference. It was a great way to see like what people were doing in between the conferences, so you could catch up with people after the event. And we were coming up on the second conference, and I was like, shit, it'd be really cool to hand something out to people. And really, I wanted to share my little, my tree. Let people know that after talking to hundreds of people about mushrooms, that even though doses are different for different people, at some point everybody feels the leaves dancing. At some point everybody feels the trees breathing. At some point everybody's tapping roots. And so giving people a guide was important to me. And I figured, all right, I could either sleep on this plane ride home 4.5 hours from Cleveland, or I can get to work. And I'm on book 24 right now, but I was on book 20 at the time, I think, or maybe 22. And I just tore out a page, started folding, and it came to me like a download. It really felt like I was in my mushroom lab, and the mushroom mycelium was talking to me. And I really made the first MycoZine on the plane ride home, wrote out everything that was going to be there, including the people I was shouting out on the back. And I even had developed like KPIs of how I was going to expand it. It came like a lightning bolt, saying that if within the first 3 months, if I can achieve this many followers, if I can print out this many copies and get them to this many people by this amount of time, then this might be a viable idea. I went back home. I designed this thing with my friends on I didn't even think I used PowerPoint. I think I used Google Sheets or Google Slides. Printed it out, and I printed out 100 of them. And since I was still doing the biopharmaceutical gig, this shit was expensive. It was like $5 a copy or something like that, $3 or $5 a copy. And I printed out 100, and I was like, here, $500, let's go. I just want to give these out for free. Got to the conference, and I literally gave out every single one. I was folding them at the conference and just handed them out. People were fucking loving them. The idea was to be a space for in between these conferences, because every conference I'd been to, by that point, I think it was like 8 that we had thrown across the country. I was like, look, every single time people are like, oh my God, we're talking about this. This is so liberating. What next? And I'll be like, see you next year. And they'll be like, but what do we do until then? And I was like, well, shit, the MycoZine. So I came out with the MycoZine. It worked out well. The reception was great. And I was like, shit, let's run it back. And so then I came out with edition 2, but this one was a little bit less focused on the psychedelics and actually focused more on the community and identifying mushrooms. You may recognize Michael Mentor here, who is formerly known as let's just say a professional athlete, was his former moniker. But you've seen people like Willie Michael or Decolonized Ongos. We got Rob here. We had a submission from Oklahoma Fungi over here, and this guy Jacob out in St. Louis, who just found my page on IG. We got Black Spit from Oakland over here as well. And I just figured I could feature foragers. I could feature people looking at mushrooms. On page 5 of every edition, I was going to show people how to grow the mushrooms, because my introduction into the space was not just the science. I learned how to cultivate in 2019, 2020. Me and Reggie were busting this work down in the lab and like really trying to figure out how to grow these mushrooms. And so page 5 tells you all the steps. Step 1 was genetics. Step 2 is grain. Then I have recipes included in this one, and then the shout outs on the back, but I continued my series of featuring the cultivators of the month on the inside. So we have the agar of the month, we have the canopy of the month, and the mushroom of the month, filled in with quotes from all of these cultivators. And if you connect all 4 of these, the first 4, it makes a giant poster of all of these submissions from people. The results were that people were really messing with it, and so we came out with a Turkey Day, Turkey Tail edition last year, and this one came out right before the the national conference. And so this pamphlet, this zine, gives me an opportunity to not only highlight the other work that we're doing within the conference space, but highlight other cultivators, highlight the indigenous creators of some of these mushroom strains like Huitlacoche, and things like puffball. You know, the World Cup was going on, and so I was like, oh, this is a soccer-looking mushroom. Little things like that have allowed me to build with the community, highlight the community on a single sheet of paper, and now I'm sending this to over 200 cities in over 10 countries. I think we just got to 11. I got somebody in Rio de Janeiro who wanted one. It's crazy, and this movement is evolving into now I'm on edition 6. We've gotten sponsors for this. Edition 7 is going to be super hype, where we're going to be breaking down all the different lanes that one can go into if they want to join the mushroom space. Not only from providing genetics, but to providing the picks and shovels like substrate and grain, to developing products like tinctures and medicinals and salves and different consumables that you can have, to creating conferences and having podcasts and educational environments. And so we're really trying to highlight all the different ways that you can get involved in the mushroom community and see who's already doing that work.
That's amazing, dude. I didn't even I honestly, I think I told you last time we were talking that I found out about you and what you do probably like a month before we spoke. And then I think 2 weeks into following you, I put out the call and your following responded. So man, it's quite the evolution. And it sounds like you're going to continue to do that. When I first found your page, I thought it was a magazine. I didn't know what a zine was.
Right.
I actually just learned what a zine was, you know? Do you see yourself getting into or do you see you know how they have High Times magazine? Do you see there being an Oakland Hyphy magazine or MycoZine?
100%. Look, when I first started this, the ideas were running. You can go back to my original posts, and the hashtags at the bottom were the High Times of Mushrooms, was the Thrasher magazine of mushrooms, was this is gonna be the next joint. I promise you, that's the vibe. But what I'm more concerned about is the community. And the reason why Thrasher was cool, the reason why High Times was cool, was not because they were making a magazine for the public and da-da-da. No, there were some dope-ass cultivators, there were some dope-ass skaters who were like, yo, let's get this footage, let's get the culture, let's see what the people are fucking doing. The magazine came. It was a result. It was a consequence of people putting out dope shit. And so I said, well, how do I get to be like the mushrooms? Every single aspect of how I've made this thing has been mycelially driven. From how it is I am marketing through the back end here with the shout outs, that was super intentional. When I learned how to do grain to grain transfers, instead of just dropping an agar plate into a grain bag, I realized, whoa, we're not talking about a single inoculation point anymore. Fuck, to be frankly honest, when I first cut up an agar plate and dropped it in a bag, I was like, wait, you can maximize agar point, inoculation points by just cutting up the agar? What? And then when I realized you could take a single grain bag and turn it into 10 grain bags, I really, frankly, never really went more than 5 or 6 just because of growth rates and blah, blah, blah. But when I discovered that, I realized, whoa, inoculation points directly impact the reach. And so my thought was, how can I be like the mushrooms? How can I increase inoculation points and sporulate? Well, if I get people in Miami, people in New York, people in Washington, people in Minnesota, people in Oregon, California, Denver, then we can inoculate in many different inoculation points rather than just focusing on Boston or LA or Chicago. We can hit the map. And so, yes, this long story less long, this will be a magazine. My original vision for it was to come out with 12 to 16 editions of this. And then because every 4 makes a poster, I was going to publish that into a full-size magazine once I have enough editions. And so then you'll be able to buy the anthology. You'll be able to purchase the MycoZine catalog from 1 to 12. That's going to be the collection of all these first 12 MycoZines. And then you'll be able to pull out the poster, put that shit on your wall, and then see all these cultivators from all over. I mean, there's levels to this myceliation, my dude.
No, dude, I love that. I want to get one of those. I want you to sign it because I think that's going to be fucking epic in 10 years, man. That's amazing.
Fucking epic right now. What you talking about?
Of course. Well, you can't be epic in the end if you weren't epic in the beginning, my friend.
You
can't have the sauce if you don't have the spice.
That's it. No, the fucking vibes.
I want to transition into the controversies of there's always like playful controversies because that's really all they are at the end of the day. Like I've had quite a few myself. You can call them haters or your biggest supporters, what have you. But when you guys came out when I saw the post and it was
the only cup that matters.
The only fucking cup that matters. I was like, dang, yeah. So I learned a little bit of the backstory when I was moderating for the Hyphae Cup, the virtual cup, in fours to stores. What was her name? Michaela.
Mama Della Myco?
Mama Della Myco, yes. I would love to have her on the show too. I think it'd be kind of.
Oh, she's excellent. She's a rider for the Hyphae team, but an amazing content creator in her own right. She's just been blowing up IG, being there for women in mycology, women in mushroom space, practitioners, and then just community in general. She's been leading the charge for quite a few of the inter-movements within the mushroom space, and so absolutely a great guest to have on.
Yeah, so I heard the backstory of how, Reg was like, yo, you start working on this. And then like by the, that morning, she started working on it super early. And like that day she had like put that in there. And so there was like, I don't understand, man. Like, I mean, I do, but I don't. But like, what was the controversy? Or what do you think from like, from your perspective? Like, what was that about? Can you talk about that, man?
Hell yeah. Let me give you the 30,000 foot breakdown here. This is that real sauce. And anybody on this live right now, yo, you guys, man, you're gonna get the real heat. What happened was in 2019, me, Reggie, and Ian came together to find out what was going on, right? We started with our first company. That company went to shit. There were some bad actors in that company that like were 100% trying to exploit us. And so by 2020, when we came out with the cup, we had to develop this shit our own. We had to go to an old cannabis lab and find someone who was like going out of business so that we could get their HPLC so that we could run the testing. At first, we were like, this was some garage shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're really figuring this out. And it wasn't even called a cup when we first started. We were just trying to find out like what's happening inside of here. I remember it was a conversation between me and Reggie where he's like, yo, what happens if the data isn't perfect or something and someone's going to try to hate on us? I was like, look, first off, we're the first people doing it. Pioneers always get the spears. Shout out to Spiritworks from Oakland, a mad good organization out here for the people. But like pioneers get the spears. So I was like, fuck it. Let's just do this and make a comparative analysis. Because if we say who has the strongest, who has the least, doesn't even matter about precision so long as we know this one was higher than this one was higher than this one. And that was the first cup. After we did that, there was somebody who showed up at the top of our list. So we invited them to our conference. We invited them to work with them. And over the next year and a half was many email correspondence, phone calls, talking about how we were going to work together, And what ended up happening was a whole lot of talking, a whole less lot of sending over samples. And then just so happens that the first sippy cup was born, as Reggie likes to call them. And so then they started coming up. The sippy cups, because we got our Hyphae cup, and then these little sippy cups, what Reggie likes to call our sons, came out of the woodworks and started doing a lot of this bro science. And so when you talk about bro science, it's not to say that some of these other cups haven't become a lot more legitimate and haven't done the science in a rigorous way. Frankly speaking, I'm super proud of the community at large for learning how to use this instrumentation, and it's 100% the vision of what we're trying to build as well. But it did feel a little funny when as soon as we came out with this idea, called it a cup, within a year, there's 4 of them. And it's a bunch of people who like, some of them come from legitimate scientific backgrounds. Some people were just bro scientists excited about figuring this out. Then, as we move forward, we try to reach out with some people. We did work with some labs and get multiple validations. But over the past 4 years, it's gotten to a point where not only have other people made other cups, but our biggest fans, our haters, whatever, started drumming up controversy because of the people that we are associating with within the space who are providing genetics or doing this and that. And a lot of hate came our way. And so we just kind of started to say, look, we got to stand up for ourselves. We got to get behind the science that we're doing. Like you said, Michaela was the one that came up with the name. I'm personally not that controversial of a person. I like to keep things copacetic. I'm like water, like I'll meet you halfway, I'll meet you halfway. But the frank situation is over the past 4 years, Reggie and the Hi-Fe team has established itself as one of the leading organizations that highlights people of color, women, LGBTQ community, and just people who are generally marginalized when it comes to the psychedelic space, which frankly speaking is generally white males. You know what I mean? Like, I've been on Reddit, I've been on Shroomy, I've been on IG, and like I see who's contributing. That's just the frank reality of the space. And so for us coming out and just doing that, we think that's important. We think that's revolutionary. And that's been the vibe since the beginning. So when we come out with the only cup that matters, oh man, the internet was not having it. Internet was not having it. They were like, what do you mean you're the only cup that matters? You guys hate everybody. You're calling out every other thing and you're saying fuck you to them. And we're over here like, wait, whose name did we call out? Name one of the names that we said. We said our name. We said we're the only cup that matters. I didn't say your life doesn't matter. I mean, not your life. Your cup doesn't matter. I didn't say your cup doesn't matter. I didn't say I said we're the only cup that matters. And it's funny because then I came out with a meme that said, all cups matter. All cups matter, bro. And it's the same sentiment, and it's the same people, straight up. Now, all jokes aside, I don't believe that our cup is the only cup that matters. I do believe that the data across the board is important and that we should look at it. And that's why at the Hi-Fe conference, that was always the plan. And that's why we broke down over 1,000 different data points. Because even though we are the first ones to do it, we haven't collected 1,000 data points. It's the community that together has collected the data that's allowed us to use our skills as analysts and as chemists to break this down in a meaningful way. It's what I achieve. It's what I hope to achieve through the mycozines. It's what I hope to achieve with all the work that I do. Combining the collective, because the community has the answers. Any one person may not have the answers, but the community does.
I love that you guys are pulling data from other sources and doing comparative analysis versus like trying to solely like run it on your back, because it's not a one-man show or one team show. It is a community effort, and basically everyone's going to start doing the same thing too. We're going to start comparatively, taking data from everyone. It's like the entire community as a movement. The way I can take it now, looking at like meeting you guys, talking to you, and like obviously you have to be a little different and a little, I wouldn't say boastful, but you have to be forward with what you're doing if you fucking believe in it first and foremost. But like, if you're looking, like, it's the, there's that meme or that picture of like Michael Phelps, and nobody knows who, I don't even know who the guy who was racing him, but there's that thing or that picture of him, like, the guy raced him looking to his like right, looking up and to the right and not focusing on his lane. He very well could have won that race if he wasn't, if he was looking forward. And I would say my take from you guys after knowing you guys and getting to know like what you're doing, why you're doing it, and the movement you're making is there is no other cup that matters. It's only what you're working on that matters. Everybody else can do what they're doing as well. And there's still opportunity to work together. It's all really about how you reference it, like, what's your intent? Your guys' intent is just like showcasing people, bringing their research to light. And because of that, I think that's why you guys are working with so many other companies and,
such a diverse cast of people, man. And it's not
True.
even just around the identity politics completely. I mean, like, truthfully speaking, it's a wide variety of people of all different ages and experiences, from people with PhDs to high school dropouts have been involved with what we're doing. And so the reality is the internet facing thing, sure, it's quite boastful. Reggie himself, he's definitely has some ego like everybody else. But frankly speaking, I've worked in this industry, this community, for several years now. And I've worked with quite a few organizations, not the least of which was like Decrim Nature in a meaningful way. And going to MAPS, going to this, that, and the third, you start to see a lot of characters who are at the head of a ship, running an organization that have a large ego. And frankly speaking, none of them who have an ego like Reggie have been as effective as him and as able to get as many people with differing values and beliefs together in a meaningful way. And so when he says shit like the only cup that matters, but that's a message that he got from a woman who's like really riding and working for the community, it's kind of hard not to support that. Because when you look at how it came to be, it's like, well, shit, we got this far and we really are putting on a lot of people. Why not stand up for ourselves? Because it's way different to say we're the only cup that matters than to say fuck this cup, fuck this cup, fuck this cup, which is not it. It's the words that people are trying to put in our mouths, but frankly speaking, nowhere on our marketing does it say anything else about other cups. It just says we matter, you know?
Yeah, and like what you guys are doing just in of yourselves, you need the community to even gather data anyway. So it's like, I don't know, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I just wanted to quickly touch on that, maybe help give others a perspective, because I'm just an unbiased opinion. I see what everyone's doing. I'm also very intuitive with myself and just nature, energy, and I know where everybody sits. I know the weight and intention of everyone, and it seems like you guys are doing nothing but good things. And of course, again, like the collective data is what's going to move everyone forward. I'm interested in your perspective because you have like boots on the ground, first perspective. Like, where do you see, with what you're doing, or just as a collective, where do you see the community kind of going in the next like 1, 3, 5 years, as far as maybe like, and you're in an area where there's decrim too, so can you kind of touch on like your perspectives of where things are moving, and maybe how you want them to move?
Yeah, so actually we just got some ballot initiative information out to Sacramento just within the past couple of weeks, where we're working to create a new decriminalized bill effectively that's going to give the most amount of people access to this with the least amount of regulatory backgrounds. And so what we learned from the last bill that did not pass, that got vetoed on Gavin Newsom's desk, was that there was not so much regulation and nothing built in to understand and study like how it is we can know what an effective dose is, what are the limits that people should be contained by, or like what is a safe and effective use of this medicine, or this plant or this substance, And our goal is by 2024 or 2025 to have this on a ballot measure so that the state of California gets to decide. And if that is the case, then frankly speaking, that's one of the coolest things about California is if you get a certain amount of the population to sign on to something, it goes to a vote and the people get to decide. And so that is what we believe is the fastest pathway towards getting this more legitimized. But frankly speaking, we're trying to create barriers to entry for commercialized mushroom farmers to come in and just take over the industry with all of their infrastructure, all of the wealth, all the things that's going to make the Campbell's Mushroom Soup Farm turn into the psychedelic magic mushroom farm. And in my personal opinion, the longer we drag out a legal battle, the more time we have for cultivators to learn how to cultivate, to do this on the underground level, because otherwise we're going to see what ended up happening in cannabis, where, all right, regulations come in, legislation comes in, but if you ask anybody who knows, the black market still runs the industry here in California. Like, it's not the dispensaries that are really running the game here. It's the black market farmers that are really doing the thing. And so if we focus on the legacy cultivators and the people who are really in this movement, and we try to show more people how to grow, that's where I see it going. And frankly speaking, I was just in Florida a couple weeks ago and saw mushrooms being sold over the counter. I've been across this entire country, and there's been very few states where I haven't seen cannabis and mushrooms sold in a gray market way across this nation. And so regardless of the legislation, regardless of how the system wants us to consume these things, the fact of the matter is mushrooms are getting in the hands of people in the chocolates of head shops across this country, and the public sentiment is going to go up. As more movies like Fantastic Fungi, as more movies involve trippy concepts and psychedelic backgrounds, people are going to become more accustomed to this, and we're going to go in the ebbs and flows of our societal progression. 50 years ago, we had the hippie movement and the anti-Vietnam War. Well, all of a sudden, you see all the war and things that are going on in our society right now. It's ripe for a time for people to explore psychedelics, and particularly mushrooms. So whether we want to do anything about it or not, I think it's happening. And if you look around, it's very clear that the wave is here.
Very true. California being such a huge part of that, I do think movements like you guys are helping to create will incentivize, it'll sound good, feel good to the public. Because I think, frankly, anything that goes to Gavin Newsom's, and I'm not speaking ill of him, I don't know him, I've never met him, never talked to him.
Right.
But anything that goes to his desk is just going to get thrown away. of course, you have, thousands of people on the streets doing fentanyl and all these like hard, heroines, crack, whatever. That's fine. But, mushrooms to maybe help those people, that's a no-no. So whether it's intentional or not, or there's not enough information there, I'm sure you guys and what you're doing is going to push the movement forward. And I'm really excited to see and know you and maybe get some updates in the future, obviously, as things happen. Let's see. We're kind of getting to what I would call the end of the podcast. I have more focused questions for you, my friend. Are you
Sure.
ready for?
And I got some questions for you. We can save for after the podcast if you're down to hang around.
That's. I mean, you can. I mean, if they're pertinent, please ask away, man. This is also an opportunity for everyone to get to know me too. This is my podcast, but you're here, and we are having a conversation. It doesn't have to be so
structured and rigid.
We're not in a box, my friend.
There we go. Think outside the box. Let's scroll outside the mycelial connections and expand.
Let's do it.
One of the things that I was really interested about doing a little research before I came onto this podcast, similar to an interview, you like to look up the job and understand the company a little bit more before you go in. Well, I wanted to know a little bit more about you. You'd been in my sphere for more than a couple of weeks. I know you had heard about me on the Mycoalchemy podcast and really got to get a sense for me. But I was cultivating back in 2019, 2020. And so I had followed you just because I think you were just another grower on IG or something like that through one of my other accounts. And I'd seen your name, seen you build a podcast, all this, but I didn't really get to know you until I did my research and leaned in. I was like, what is this first podcast? And I was so impressed with how you were talking about, hey, I'm going to have this structure, I'm going to have this thing, but I want it to be an open conversation. And because you had a background in podcasting, you had a setup and you realized it looks like just getting started. We just got to get started, put it out there and build. Well, now you're at, I think, over 50 episodes. I mean, you have a body of work. You've really started to do this thing here. I want to know a little bit more about what that looks like because this year, now I've been on 4 or 5 podcasts. I've started to record a little bit for myself. Now, I know everybody and their grandmother thinks that they can start a podcast and do this thing. But as you had mentioned in your first podcast, some people really do have the gift of gab. Some people really do have this capacity to communicate with others in a more nuanced way, and that's our skill set, right? I would love to see a situation where I can reach out to my community and provide meaningful information, not only about what's going on in the testing and the science, but around the legislative sphere and around the community of foraging and mycology in general through the zine, and I see that as a pathway forward. I've started things like a YouTube channel and a Discord and a Patreon, but I wanted to hear your insight into what did it look like to develop your podcast and why is it that you've stuck with this over anything else?
Interesting. I think at a basis it was, yes, I do feel I have something to say, something to offer to the community. I think my words of what have penetrated through whether video, photo, or any type of content. And I wasn't always like this in that I love to share. It's really first and foremost, I believe that how well you speak on something, how well you can teach something is a representation of how much you know about something.
Yeah.
So it's a good way for me to see where I'm at in my own knowledge, my weak points and things like that. The podcast was cool because I felt safe in the podcast because YouTube, strike after strike. I was on my second strike with YouTube, and my very last strike is just, it's actually about 30 days away from being erased. And I'm getting back into the YouTube scene because of that. I'm going to be filtering my Patreon content down back into YouTube, and I've had to rescape how my content looks and how it's received so that it meets community guidelines. So I'm just learning to be a content creator in general, but I feel like also from a consumption standpoint, most people these days are consuming either long form video content and I can only go from my own perspective. A lot of the time when I'm doing lab work, for instance, or I'm around the house, I'm listening to an audiobook. Yeah, which also too can translate into short form, for reels, etc., sure. Shorts, all that. But for me, when I'm doing lab work, for instance, or I'm cooking, if my girlfriend's not there, it's just me. I have headphones in and I have my phone off into the side with the YouTube video, and I'm learning. I'm also just an auditory person, And I'm also a practical visual person. So when I see something done, I know how to I can figure out how to, with a little bit more information and research, how to actually implement something. So the podcast was safe. I feel like your words obviously are like what's creating reality and can shift perspective. Also, you can really like observe the depth of someone's knowledge or intent based on their tonality of their words. So written form it doesn't speak to me. I'm not a writer. Video wise, if I have someone helping me record, videos, it helps. I love to edit, but like the basis in all of this content is your voice. It's just how it's modulated, how it's used. And I found that podcasting is and was what will be how I leave a mark. This also translates into some of my goals for this future. This year in particular, I will be speaking hopefully at SciCon in Vegas in May.
Okay.
I just have to be approved for my whatever I'm presenting there. I will be speaking at the Oklahoma Mushroom Festival and hopefully one or two other events. I would like for this podcast to translate into speaking engagements as well. So kind of like a precursor. The more speaking you do, the more people know that you can speak, maybe opportunities to spread my message, but also help to elevate the community and those who've brought me to where I'm at too. So that's kind of like the reason why the podcast. And of course, like I'm doing video form now too. It just started as just audio and I was just trying to figure that whole thing out.
Yeah.
And got a really good response from the community. I wouldn't say I was the first one to start a podcast about mushrooms. Obviously there's like Fresh from the Farm, I believe there's
Welcome to the Mushroom Hour. There's Mycopreneur Podcast. We got the Funga and Flora podcast as well. Shout out my homie KK in the Villages, Florida. Hooked me up with this shirt when I went and visited. So there's a few people out here doing the thing.
Yeah, so they were my inspiration. I was like, you know what? Let's do this. And now it's transformed into something where like at the base of what we're doing, we're all just trying to fucking heal each other, right?
Heal ourselves. We're just trying to heal ourselves. And by doing that in front of others and showing humility and saying, hey, this is where I've learned, we're providing opportunities for others to try the same.
Thank you. Exactly. And with that, I also have like health and wellness as a background, eating, working out, cold plunge, sauna, red light. Like I'm doing everything I can to just keep my head above water, above the anxiety level, and to like strengthen myself as a man, as a person, and like a community leader. Like I have a platform now. You have a platform. Like people like care to hear what we have to say. So why not make it intriguing and make it informational,
That blows my mind, because like this started a year ago, man. This started with just an idea on a plane in a notebook that I folded up into paper. And now I've gone on a mushroom tour across the country. Like in edition 6, I highlight this. Behind there, you can't even really see it, is a map of the United States. Because like this is LA. This is Denver. This is Chicago. This is when we were in Maine. This is when we were in Pennsylvania. This is when... You see what I'm saying? And these are all different places where I've gone around talking to people about mushrooms. That is a trip.
That is a trip in itself. Life is a trip. And man, I'm just like you said when you first... Every time I've talked to you, I'm blessed. I woke up today and...
woke up breathing. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, because I'm breathing. And this morning, knowing I was going to talk to you today... to my girlfriend, I was like, do you know what today is? And she's like, Thursday? I'm like, no. She's like, what? I'm like, it's the best fucking day ever because we're alive.
We woke up today! Yo, you get the fucking vibes, bro. That's it. And if you can wake up like that, if you can start your day off by like, I swear, it was sometime around last year, maybe around this time, it just clicked for me. It was like when you open up your eyes, there's an initial thought. And it might be like some stress you're working about. It might be something you're thinking about. It could be whatever. But I just remembered thinking like, how do I say thank you, God? How do I thank you for another day? Like just starting it off with that. You don't have to be religious. You don't have to have faith or whatever. Like, but if you just can sit there and be grateful for the fact that you got a whole nother breath in your lungs, that your eyes opened up, whatever may come, you were given that opportunity. And like that, since I started thinking like that, dude, I'm here talking to you. I'm out here not working a regular 9-to-5 job because I test psychedelic mushrooms, because I set out to do that, because I'm creating my own publishing company, because I take notes every day, and this is a gift to myself. you know, the books are cool, but like the fact that I get to go back through 24 different books of what happened to me, you know how many lessons I've learned that I don't have to relearn again just because I reread my notes? I mean, that shit is mind-blowing. So cool.
Man, I'm blown away with like what you're doing, and there's nobody else doing it like you, man. And I don't think anybody else is gonna do it like you. So just keep on pushing, bro. The positive energy, the awareness, the mindset, it's so important. And like you're a great example and a pillar in that in our community, man. Like it's been like so cool, like just to get to know you on a personal level, but also like on a business level. And man, like anything in the future, if you ever want me to like be involved, like my community would fucking love it. I would love it. And I'm sure we can continue to exchange value in some shape or form, bro. Like, can't even tell you, like, yeah, thanks for the question, by the way. I haven't been asked a question on the podcast yet. That's kind of cool.
Hey, dude, we're starting today. We're today's years old when we figured out that we can set that up and build that into the podcast. Because that's one of the funny things that I've noticed about really good podcasters, really good interviewers, is they do a great job of asking questions of other people, but there's that gap. Like, how come we don't get to ask you the situation? And I thought it would be really cool for my audience as well to learn a little bit more about you. And so hopefully when I start my podcast, I can invite you on. We could do the same thing.
Love that.
Because this is a community that will grow together. And I'm 100% going to be putting Mycotrophic in the shout outs to the next MycoZine. And hopefully if you get this published and edited before it goes, I'm going to slap that QR code in there so people can get this in the mail. They'll just do the little scan thing, and all of a sudden, guess what? They're looking at our beautiful faces, talk about how we love breathing.
Let's go.
That's how we do this.
Love it, bro. Yeah, and it's just the abundance mindset. It really comes down like if I highlight you, you highlight me. We just highlight each other.
Free.
And then we become support beams in each other's like foundation. It just makes sense to me. Why tear each other down? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Just look at the mushrooms. What do? Do the hyphae run away from each other? Fuck no, they just run, and if they connect, they link up in the end. What are we talking about?
That's right.
This is that work together shit. And if I can find ways that I can learn from the mushrooms, I will do that, because they decompose, they break shit down, and I don't know everything. I know some stuff. Don't get it twisted. I didn't study and pay all this money to get these degrees to not know some shit. But I will tell you, I don't know nothing. And these mushrooms keep showing me that. And so I'm going to take what I do know, bring it to the table, and you can take what you know, bring it to the table, and we'll just keep growing this abundance. Because 2 years ago, all right, let me put it this way. In 2021, we threw our first Oakland Psychedelic Conference. And I remember that event just being monumental for us. And I remember being on the stage there and looking at everybody and saying, look, you guys, with these notebooks and this consistency, in a single year, we took an idea and turned it into the Oakland Hyphae and Hyphae Labs and conference movement. Me and Reggie and my sister went to a Detroit psychedelic conference in 2020. Reggie sat down and said, oh shit, I could do this in Oakland. And then within 1 year, we put on one of the coolest shows that had ever happened. And I can't help but looking back at that moment and saying, you guys, look what we've done in just a year. If you just stay focused and committed, look at what you can do. That was 2 years ago. And to look at where we're at now, just because we've stayed focused and committed, yo, what? So that's all I offer to people. If I can say one thing from this whole podcast, take your notes, start with the date. Be grateful for the days that you get and the challenges you face. And above all things, stay committed to the things that serve you and make you feel good. Because if you do that, well, you might just end up on the Mycotrophic podcast. What's good, baby?
My dude. Well, speaking of, you said something like the more you know, the more you don't know. That's something I truly believe, and forever student and humble to the experience. So things that you do know, obviously you have this incredible mindset. I wish I had more people like you in my life. I'm happy that we connected. I'm interested to know, like, what core tenets or belief system do you have that help drive your mindset, that help you stay consistent in your workflow?
I'm going to keep it 1,000,000% honest. Is faith in God. That's what brought me here. 100%. Yeah. Like, I know it might sound corny. It might sound like the people at the Super Bowl, like, oh, God got me here. But, like,
no, I get you.
It's really that. Like, I wake up and the first thing I try to say in the morning is thank you, God. Like, and that has dramatically increased my abundance in so many more things than these slave coupons and these dollars. Like, I no longer look at wealth as the accumulation of slave coupons. I look at it as the accumulation of relationships and meaningful experiences. Like, you couldn't pay me the amount of money of joy that this experience that we just had today. This past hour was a real live interaction of two humans. Like, I had to work 30 years of my life to get to this point. You can't trade that for slave coupons. You can't trade that for that. And so the core tenets of my belief system are understanding where we come from and how we get forward by looking backwards. Like, truthfully, I started this podcast saying, when this started, how did this start? It started with my grandparents coming here from Colombia. Like, straight up, I'm made out of 25% of each of my grandparents, and I walk with them. Every single step that I take is an amalgamation of generations of people coming together so that I can be here talking with you. And by looking at it like that, it has humbled me. It's humiliating to really think of like how much work people have done just so that I could be an asshole, just so that I can joke around and do whatever it is that I'm doing. And when I look at it through that perspective, it brings me down to earth enough to say like, wow, I really have this opportunity to try my best and fuck around and find out. You know what I mean? Yeah, that willingness to just be a student, man. The willingness to know that I'm not right all the time, that I can always learn something new, that I should listen to other people's perspectives. It has allowed me to do everything that I want to do and achieve all the goals that I set out to achieve. And they never looked the way that I thought when I was setting them in the first place. But that's the whole beauty of it all, man.
Gratitude, God, humility.
Mushrooms.
Yes. And mushrooms. Yeah, very much. I have two lasting questions for you, my friend. The infamous question I try to ask everybody, at least in the cultivation space, but also if this mushrooms have helped you in your life. Love to get your perspective in a short form, long form, however, interpret as you may, kind of a way. And that is, Tomas of MycoZine, in what ways every day are you moving or trying to grow in mind, body, spirit, and mushroom?
And repeat that question one more time, because I really want to sit with this one.
Sure. Yeah, it's I use the loaded question for the end, because it really helps everybody give different perspectives. So, in what ways every day are you striving to grow in mind, body, spirit, and mushroom?
The ways that I'm trying to grow are through being, more like the mushroom. Like, straight up, how do I break things down more? How do I bring things to their more elemental form? Because that's what the mushrooms do. They communicate by breaking things down. The thing that I've been doing that's been most successful, and this is a key point that I want to make too, is that a few years ago when we started philosophizing about how do we move forward, how do we change the world by moving forward, what do we need to do, I started reframing that narrative of like, what do I need to do, to what am I doing right now that's currently working? Because it's so easy to get nebulous and be like, oh, I need to do this next thing, I need to do this next thing, rather than being reflective and actually saying, what am I doing right now that's actually working, and how do I lean more into those things that are working? So the notes, for me, by just writing down the date every single day, I make sure that I have a really low bar set for what it is that I need to achieve. And even if I write nothing more than the date, what I know is I'm staying consistent with the goals that I'm setting to achieve. And because of doing that, now I'm in book 24. Whereas before I didn't have the basic, just write down the date. And there would be 2-3 weeks sometimes where I wouldn't even pick up my notebook. And so that's why I'm trying to grow in that diligence. I'm trying to grow in diligence. In terms of my mind and my body, personally, I've had bouts with like trying to reduce my cannabis consumption, because although it's been a super helpful tool for me, it 100% functions as a medicine at times. I'm very well aware of the fact that, like, man, if I could better my relationship with that and make it more of a once in a while thing, I could see myself skyrocketing in terms of my potential or capacity to get things done. But everything's give and take. And then mind, body, and mushroom. I mean, for me, it all goes back to the same thing. How do I find gratitude of the Almighty in all things that I do? If I can find a way to remember creation in all things that I do, I feel protected. I feel more capable. It seems to me that whenever I've been more diligent in my faith, everything else starts to go right. And so I think everything is everything. The mushrooms have told me that all things are connected. And so if I can remember that, it gives me a little bit more patience, a little bit more empathy. And even when things are frustrating to me, I realize that like this is an opportunity to learn how to deal with something better.
Diligence, my friend. You definitely have it. I'm a notebook person myself. I was just talking with you before we started. I still have notebooks from 4 or 5 years ago where I was writing. Literally, I need to do an episode or just like show people a picture, like the date, just like a random title or tasks for the day, and then even like affirmations or beliefs that I was like trying to like embed in my subconscious. And like the lifestyle I wrote down then is what I have now. Like I think that's a fucking key. Like bro, like that's it's a hack and people don't even realize it. So like I see you.
That shit is so cool, man. I was in a laboratory.
It's so real too.
I was in a laboratory like 5 or 7 years. I think it was like 7 years ago. And this OG, it was like a 70-year-old Einstein-looking dude. Shout out Gary from Wisconsin. He's probably retired by now. Hopefully he's still alive. He would tell me about that, like just how taking notes was so important in his life and how so many scientific discoveries came out of people just making sure they wrote things down. And in that quality control environment, people would tell me things like, yo, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. But then it clicked for me, wait, if I write it down, does it happen? And then as soon as I started writing down my goals and I could reflect on them and see, am I achieving them? And then they just started to happen because now I have a point to like go back to and say, hey, is this the focus? Am I achieving the focus? Yes? No? Course correct. Hey, is this the focus? Am I Yes? No? Course correct. And yeah, dude, I mean, it's the easiest gift in the world to give yourself reflection, and then you can't deny it. Like later on when you look back at it, you can't be like, well, he said that or she. No, I said that, and that's a beautiful thing.
Amazing. And I hope everybody takes notes of your notes. Lasting question here. How can people find you? How can they get in contact with you? And how can they best support you going forward?
Well, most importantly, get you a MycoZine. I have a website, I have a Patreon, I have an email. All three are on the front here. Whatever vector you want to contaminate me with your existence, please do, because we're a culture growing together. This petri dish is popping with all types of genetics, and all it looks like is going to my website, putting in your information, sending an email to the mycozine@gmail.com, send me your information. Go into my IG, go into the Patreon, signing up, send me that mailing information, and I'll do my best to get you on that list and get you a MycoZine as soon as I can. I'm doing this on faith. I've been sending these out, spent probably thousands of dollars of my own money to make sure that this movement has gone forward. And in kind, I've been given everything that I put back in, I've gotten back at this point. And now it's starting to grow into something that could potentially be sustainable for me, could potentially be sustainable for the industry. And so I'm going to continue to keep on sending these out. If you send me your email, I'm going to trust, I'm going to have faith that it's going to come back to me. I'm asking people to toss me for the printing costs and the shipping costs, but I do everything in my power to keep it as cheap as I possibly can. And if you don't got the ends to get a MycoZine, send me your address and I'll still send it out. Because at the end of the day, I'm just trying to connect us and make it happen. And I have faith that I'm not going to go broke doing that. So, sign up for the MycoZine. Reach me at Patreon, the MycoZine, IG, MycoZine, Gmail, the mycozine@gmail.com, or you can check out the website, themycozine.com.
Oh, man. Tomas, thank you so much for joining us today. If you guys enjoyed this episode, make sure to give it a like. Don't forget to drop a comment down in the comment section. And don't forget to subscribe. You guys, hit that bell icon so you can be notified when we post brand new episodes. And wherever you're listening at, please, all I ask, really, my biggest ask is to leave a review. Leave a 5-star review. or a somewhat of a nice review for us to review on iTunes or Spotify. And also, if you guys want to learn more about growing mushrooms and want to join this community, you guys can go to my Patreon at patreon.com/mycotrophic. Tomas, thank you so much for joining us today. Really look forward to getting to know you more, working with you more in the future, and I'm really excited for everybody listening to this episode. Until next time, guys, namaste. Have a great day. Don't contemplate and meditate, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out, guys.
Thank you so much. Man, this was super
Peace.
cool. Are we staying on, or are we going to bounce real quick?
No, I've got time. Go ahead.
All right, I'm going to turn off this live. Peace out, y'all. Save this for later.